Look, these are people who are talented and have done this before. You can't just appoint novices. You have to have people who know what they're doing. But at the same time, moving forward, this is an administration that's going to run very differently than typical Washington.
Our all-stars tonight: Amy Stoddard, associate editor at Real Clear Politics; Charles Hurt, political columnist for the Washington Times; Daniel Halper, online Washington bureau chief for the New York Post; and Tom Rogan, columnist with National Review. Great to see all of you tonight. All right, Tom, you said you still have some friends who are recovering, as we talked about, from Brexit. They're still digesting the Trump election, but he's now full on in transition mode. We have two names today: Reince Priebus and Steve Bannon, with different roles, two very different guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think most Republicans in Washington will be very happy with the choice of Reince Priebus, because he is seen as someone who can go and meet with not just Republicans on the Hill, but Democrats, a good interlocutor for President Trump. I think what's also interesting is you see the divergence now in the international community. The British government really making a lot of effort to outreach towards Donald Trump, called their foreign minister away from an EU meeting, which essentially was going to complain about Donald Trump. But other EU nations, notably Germany, still putting a very tough line there. And so it's very interesting to see how that binding influence of Brexit and Trump is not just the electoral surprise, but actually new kind of alliances in international politics.
We had some positive tweets today. One from Senator Lindsey Graham, who was not a Trump fan, a one-time presidential rival to him during the primaries. He said, "Congrats to @RealDonald Trump for outstanding choice of Reince to be chief of staff. This shows me he is serious about governing." There was also a Newt Gingrich tweet. He says the Bannon-Priebus team is a tremendous choice by President-elect Trump. Bannon for key strategies, Priebus for daily management. Great team. Now, Daniel, you know Twitter's also filled with a lot of people who don't like these choices. They're accusing Bannon of being a racist, far alt-right, white national supremacist, or ties to those groups. So it's playing very differently.
Yeah, look, like with much else with Donald Trump, if you're inclined to dislike him, you're going to hate this, and you're going to think Stephen Bannon up there in the White House, this is really bad news. Reince Priebus there. He is by definition the Republican establishment. But if you're inclined to like Donald Trump, you, of course, will find positive things to like about this. Reince Priebus shows that he can work with Paul Ryan and work with Capitol Hill and work with the Republican establishment to try to transform Washington in the way Donald Trump will be. And of course, plenty of people at home are like Breitbart and like Stephen Bannon, and we'll find a lot to like in him. But I think there's a lot to read into it, is what I'm trying to say. But the key here is that Donald Trump had a winning team that brought him to the White House, or that is bringing him to the White House, but successfully won this presidential election, and he is sticking with the exact same team all the way through. And I think people are probably reading a little bit too much into it and what they want to see into it, rather than just, this is a guy who wants to keep the old band back together because they helped him win, and he wants to move them into the White House together.
And Charlie, he's always campaigned on the fact that he's an outsider. He's not part of the Washington elite. He's not part of that group. But by leaning on someone like Reince, I mean, he's definitely pulling in the more established part of the party, those connections. And, some folks say that gives them reassurance, like Lindsey Graham, that he's serious about actually governing and being the president.
Well, I think that one of the big problems that President-elect Trump has to begin with is the fact that he has run such an outsider campaign. And this is a very screwed up, complex town where you have a lot of various centers of power, and it could be a nightmare for anybody. I think it shows a degree of wisdom that he would bring in somebody that does at least know Washington. I think watching some of the things that some of the statements that we've seen from, as you showed with Lindsey Graham and others in Congress, I've been surprised by that. They've been far more positive than I thought that they would be. But he faces a Republican Congress that really does. They're not going to give in to him, I don't think. I think that it's going to be an adversarial relationship, and that's a wonderful thing for America. And then in terms of Steve Bannon, Bannon was very much the heart and soul of that campaign, and I think that he is smart to have someone around who will remind him of just and as hot and raw and as unpleasant as a lot of the views that a lot of voters have about this place. I think it's important that Trump be reminded of that while he's in the White House.
Somebody who has been talked about a lot and was on the Trump support bandwagon very early, former House Speaker Newt Gingrich. I want to play a little bit of what he had to say about how they're going to put together this team and who may be on it.
I think they're going to look very hard for people who are committed to change, who understand the general direction, not just of President-elect Trump and Vice President-elect Pence, but also of the Americans who elected them. There was a real popular surge of people who want Washington changed, and that's the people who President-elect Trump represents.
So, A.B., do you think he does some, picks out of left field some very different people who aren't Washington insiders? I mean, we know he had people surrounding him like Senator Jeff Sessions. A lot of people think he's going to be offered a cabinet position, and some other names we're familiar with. But do you think he does anything really outside the box?
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised at all if he did something just sort of unorthodox, maybe name a Democrat too here or there. I think that people are watching. They're watching the announcement about Steve Bannon and Reince Priebus. And as you saw, you know, Paul Ryan and Senator Lindsey Graham said this is really great news that he's picked Reince Priebus as chief of staff. No mention of Bannon. So then you have Gingrich's tweet that says the Bannon-Priebus news is so exciting, or whatever he said, Bannon first. The press release named them as co-equals, using that word. Bannon announced on top of Reince Priebus's name. Titles don't matter in Trump's world. He only consults with a few people, and he ultimately makes up his mind by himself. Steve Bannon makes him feel good. He tells him he's a movement leader and he's changing the country and he's moving something historical. The rest of the people around him are just managing him all the time and trying to normalize him and trying to stop him and put him into wedges. And so he's going to probably surround himself with the people that make him feel the best. Jeff Sessions has been loyal. He'll probably give him a job, Rudy Giuliani, Newt Gingrich. And I expect a lot of surprises in the other positions. But the concern for everyone at this point is the national security staff, many of which decided a long time ago, were very vocal about the fact that he was unfit to serve, didn't have the temperament to be commander-in-chief. They really need to come on board. And that really, I think, is the thing making the people most nervous, who are watching the transition as he fills these spots.
Well, Tom, what do you think the mood is like at the Pentagon, Defense Department, when he obviously had the famous statement during the campaign talking about the fact that he knew more about ISIS than the generals did? Yeah. That didn't go over well with a lot of folks in the Pentagon.
No, it didn't. I think people have been pleasantly surprised, though, in general, in the sense that he had that meeting with President Obama in which there was he was calm compared to perhaps his previous statements about the president.
He looked a little bit sobered.
He did, and I think that's the other fact. I did a piece for National Review last week talking about the sort of national security team that, you know, the potential to sort of bring back that establishment, not neocon but realist. One of the interesting things is how much is his the presidential daily brief, which he now gets, subject to President Obama's, you know, decision on sources and methods, but essentially he gets the real meat of it now. He knows what the Russians are doing. He knows that through human source, the very highest level stuff. And I think that's part of the sobering influence, because when you see that and you see where it comes from, it's very hard to say, I don't believe it, it's fake. And I think that influence is like, wow, now it's up to me, and if I fail, it's my legacy as well as the country. So I think that sobering influence is why a lot of people are slightly more comfortable. But again, as A.B. says, time will tell. Yeah, the appointments will tell.
Daniel, how much do his choices say about the kind of administration that he plans to run as we get more names?
I think it says a lot, and I think from this, again, we learned that he values loyalty, he values people who he trusts, and he wants to keep them close. These White House jobs are, this is why we're talking about it, they're extremely important. They make very big decisions, and they help decide what the president decides and what decisions the president's going to see. So they're immensely important, and we don't know these people. They don't require Senate confirmation like the cabinet members, who in a way are sort of less important. They're certainly more high profile, but they make decisions you know, that aren't as consequential as the president will. And so obviously these are hugely important, which is exactly why we're talking about it.
Charlie, do you think that he's on track with a transition? Because there's some folks who say, listen, they didn't truly expect that he was going to win, that there are, you know, now 4,000 positions, all these administrative and bureaucratic things that have to be filled. You know, do you think that they were prepared to dive into that level of personnel appointments?
There's no doubt that, you know, leading into the election, that a lot of his supporters were believing the, you know, onslaught of media that was saying there's no way he's going to win, that she's going to win, and she's going to win by over 300 electoral college votes. And so I think that there was some sort of surprise in the last week, and then certainly afterwards. Oh my goodness, we really might catch the car that we've been chasing, and now they have, and so they have to do all that. But it's a, you know, it is a, because he has run such an unorthodox campaign. It is an opportunity for him to do a lot of unorthodox things now, and he can talk about, you know, provocative picks like a Newt Gingrich in an important position that would make a lot of people in Washington freak out, and a lot of the people that supported him would just they would love to see Washington freak out.
Well, yeah, I think that's why people voted for him in large part. AB, the removal of Governor Christie is kind of leading the effort, and now Vice President-elect Mike Pence, it sounds like he's got a lot of influence and he's got his ear as he makes these big decisions.
Right. I think the children who really, ultimately it's his daughter and his son-in-law that are the most important people on this entire planet. And so that's why I said titles don't matter. You can be chief of staff, you can be chief strategist, but he's going to call Jared whenever he wants to talk about decision making, and his daughter. So they intervened, right, and they got rid of Corey Lewandowski, a former campaign manager, and then they had Paul Manafort in his place. And then ultimately, Paul Manafort went by the wayside mid-August, and Steve Bannon and Conway took over. Trump is, as he makes these decisions, he is dealing with a little bit of a team of rivals, and so you have that discomfort between Jared Kushner and Chris Christie. Chris Christie was so loyal to Trump. Trump felt that he wanted to reward that. It's not surprising after the children promoted Mike Pence, and Pence proved to be so loyal, that he ended up superseding Chris Christie and was able to take on a bigger role, and Chris Christie got the rub out. He's had some bad news stories out of the Bridgegate thing, and it just doesn't come as a surprise.
So he's kind of Lincolnian.
We'll leave that there.